Welcome back to the Educated Podcast, the show that unlocks the real stories and innovations behind the Doctor of Education degree. Each episode welcomes trailblazing educators, industry innovators, and visionary leaders who share how their doctorates transformed their lives and their careers. The goal here is simple: for you to laugh, learn, and get inspired as guests reveal the diverse paths, pivots, and possibilities of the EDD journey. I'm your host, Dr. Minerva, and today I am joined by Dr. Taja McFarlane,
Hi.
an accomplished educator who is a member of the class of 2026 Doctor of Education graduates from Arizona State University, where she completed her EDD degree in leadership and innovation. Over the years, she served as a Head Start teacher, instructional leader, and is currently a school principal known for strengthening school culture, elevating instructional practice, and building resilient, equity-driven teams. She has climbed the ranks from teacher to school principal, all while researching how we can better support school administrators through the power of narrative. Dr. Taja McFarlane, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here and to contribute to this great work. I love the platform that you have created and an opportunity to share my gifts with others, especially ones on the same path in the education realm.
That is the perfect segue for you to tell us a little bit more about yourself. What do you love about being a leader?
It's so funny because I am the second oldest of 7 brothers and sisters, and immediately I jumped into that leadership role as a sibling, right? I was always the one coordinating my brothers and sisters, getting everybody lined up and dressed and prepared to go. If my mom or my dad was to say that we were going on an outing, and that was just something that I naturally gravitated towards, right? As a leader, when I became an educator, actually, is when I helped one of my siblings learn how to count. I remember getting a report back from school, overhearing my mom talk about how she was struggling, and the teacher shared how she was struggling. And I said, I got this. I'm about to show her how to count, and we're going to break through these educational obstacles that she was facing. And from that point on, I knew that, okay, I can do this. I can lead groups. I can lead kids. This is something that I wanted to continue to grow. And then once I became a teacher, I knew immediately after that point that I wanted to do something bigger and more beyond being a classroom teacher. And that's inspiring and supporting and being a connector and resource for other educators.
It sounds like you knew from an early age that education was in your bloodstream. Would you describe that as being the defining moment that made you realize education wasn't just a job, but a lifelong calling?
I would say that happened really as I became a teacher inside of a school district. My beginning years as an educator was in early childhood. Early childhood will always have a special place for me in my heart. I started as, like a lot of us, in preschool, right, in Head Start. And then as I got older and learned the origins of Head Start in our country and creating that level playing field for often marginalized kiddos, I knew that not only was I a product of this, but I wanted to be someone who accelerated that and created those paths for others. But you learn really quickly that you are only impacting that group that you are working with directly, right? So as a school principal, I am impacting my school. I started reaching out to other leaders out there to share things that were happening well for me and to also share those struggles to see if someone else was having those breakthroughs and finding solutions for problems that we were all experiencing, because I learned really quickly that other people were experiencing some of the obstacles. Other people were struggling with getting their attendance up for their students and getting them to school every day. Other leaders were struggling with finding high quality teachers and educators for their students. Learned really quickly that I can only do so much, but who I have around my students, who I hire to be around my students, is really who are going to be the ones that change the path for my students. I learned that by making those connections with other leaders. So when I started to make those other connections with the leaders and leaders were reaching back out to me for more insight and more resources, I found a lot of joy in that. I found a lot of joy in sharing the resources and creating data spreadsheets with like schools. Like we are serving the same demographic. And oftentimes we would get data that would be chunked in our entire district, right? And that's nice. That's beautiful. But I wanted to see exactly what was happening at campuses that were serving the same demographic of students that I was serving, the same high, lower socioeconomic groups, the same English language learners, and create those cohorts with other leaders. And then in that work, I became a go-to leader myself. So that is something that really moved me to the next level as a leader because originally it was teacher, but now I feel like I'm becoming more this teacher of adults and teacher of creating systems that are way more effective and efficient for students.
Given that you are a 2026 graduate, how did you decide on Arizona State University and the program you selected?
My family is originally from back east New Jersey, and then for work opportunities, our family moved out to California. And then from there, we moved to Arizona in 93, 1994. So this is when Arizona was a very slow pace, growing Southwest city, lower cost of living. We were one of the first ones here, right? And from that point, I remember just always hearing about the state college, Arizona State University. Arizona State University is originally a teacher's college. So right now it is currently an engineering school, broadcasting school, but originally Arizona State University's origin story is a teacher's college. It cranked out teachers throughout the entire country. I started first in the bachelor's program. It wasn't straight out of high school. Straight out of high school, I don't think I received the guidance that I needed to know what it took to go into college, but I know that my mom always told me and my siblings, you are A brains, you're college brains. You are A brains, you are college brains. She implanted those words in us. She spoke those words over us, and it was something that I believed. However, I wasn't prepared to go straight into college from high school. I remember taking the ACT, SAT test. I remember the night before the SAT test going to a concert, not taking it as seriously, these traditional pathways that it took to get into college. My sister went to college above me. She went on a thespian scholarship in acting. And so I just knew I was going to go right behind her. I'm an A brain. My mother said, I'm going to college. I'm going to college. And I remember receiving a letter that said that I was not accepted into Arizona State University and thinking, oh my gosh, I just graduated high school. What am I to do next then? What paths are out there for me? And from that point, I was like, I'm going to join the workforce. I got into working in childcare programs around where we lived, and I loved it. But I knew deep down inside there was supposed to be more happening. I know what my mom implanted in me, what my family expected of me, and the gifts that I already had inside of me. And a cohort opportunity came up when I was working at Head Start. So I went from a student in Head Start at 3 years old to a teacher in Head Start. And now here we go again with Head Start opening a door for me and opportunities for me. And Head Start created a cohort for teachers who were teachers in Head Start who had their associate's degrees, who wanted to pursue their bachelor's degrees through Arizona State University. And our lead teacher at that time, Dr. Beth Swatner, curated path for us of college courses that we took together as a cohort and that we completed. So from there, I got my bachelor's degree. I'll never forget when I received my bachelor's because President Barack Obama spoke at our graduation. So I'll never forget that moment. I had a great experience at Arizona State University for my bachelor's. I went on to Prescott College for my master's in educational leadership before becoming a principal. Prescott College was a great experience as well. I learned a lot about the area. A lot of Black Lives Matters leaders were actually teachers at Prescott College during that time as well. And then from there, another opportunity came up as I was a principal. It had been years since I graduated. I was content. I was fine. I was very excited when I graduated with my master's. I remember thinking, and we all have these things that we think about when we finish high school, bachelor's, master's. And each time you're like, do I stop? Like, is this it? I remember when I got my master's, I thought, I'm never going back to school. I was like, I would never go for that doctorate. I'm done. I'm good. I'm content. So I thought, because working, enjoying my life as a leader, as a teacher, as a principal, an opportunity came up within our district for a mix of funding provided by our district and Arizona State University creating a lower cost path for us to honor some of the credits that we had already received and to obtain our doctorate in educational leadership and innovation in 3 years. And I remember going to the listening session for it. At that time, I had just experienced the loss of my brother, who was 34 years old when he passed. And I remember sitting in the auditorium at the high school, and it was packed full of individuals who were interested in joining the doctoral program. But they were only accepting about 13, 16 people. And I'm like, oh, there's no way they're going to select me. Immediately triggered, right? That first rejection when it was time to go to college. And I got that letter from Arizona State. And I'm like, oh. And even though I know I have all the gifts, my work shows it. The evidence and everything that I was doing showed that I was college material, like my mother spoke over us when we were younger. And I said, well, I'll apply for it and I'll still do the work. And hey, what's the worst they can say is no. Remember, you didn't want to go back to school anyway after your master's. Don't forget that feeling too, when you were happy and content and you were done, that you had accomplished getting your second master's. I got 2 masters. So I filled out the application. I submitted the writing sample, which was my master's thesis. And it's so funny because I go back and read my master's thesis now and I'm like, what were you writing? How did this get, what was happening here? But I was so in love with the work and it was learning through play. So I always talk about that because as a principal, people look at me now like I don't remember the foundations of learning. And I know that the basis is learning through play, even though we live in a system and an education that is full of assessments and testing and all the things. And I remember individually, all of us who was selected to join the doctoral program. And I remember getting that email that said, welcome to Arizona State University, and you're going to be part of this doctoral journey. And of course, it was right when I had planned road travel, very extensive cross-country travel back east at the same time. And they said, get ready because you're going to hit the ground running. So it was literally accepted into the program 1 week. First class 2 weeks later, and I was starting this traveling on the road, and I mentioned the loss of my brother. So it was very important for me still to have very close connections with family during this time. I know that when we sat down with our instructors originally, they shared with us, you're going to go through so many life changes during these next few years. And I remember them chuckling about divorces and all these things. And I immediately spoke up and I said, well, we are going to be the cohort of positive things that happened during this time, right? And for all praise to God, it did happen. All of us were leaders in education, all within the same district. A handful of us out of the 16 were principals. During that time, I got married during my 3 years of getting my doctorate. And 2 people within our cohort had children during that time. And it was really a cohort where we were blessed and positive things happened to us over this very hard, demanding, challenging, all the things that they say that it takes to get a doctorate. It was, there were no shortcuts. That's probably why I'm always looking out the side of my eye when I see honorary doctorates being passed out. I'm like, oh no. And my husband has to hear it because I have to talk about all the things that it really takes to accomplish and get to that point. But it was definitely an experience, that a divine path of completing that 3 years of work and dedication to the work that I started. I always talk about the work that I started and that I did, that it is not just my work. It is definitely acknowledging the work and the gifts of my aunts, my mom, my grandmother, all the people that are in my family that could be doctors themselves if the right opportunities would have opened up for them or if their lives took different paths. So I always say it's a continuation or a completion, acknowledgement of the work that was done before me too.
It's really interesting because I recently was reminded about Dr. Linda Darling Hammond, who is a pioneer in the teacher education world. And when you mentioned honorary doctorates, she has more than a handful and she's
Mhm.
really remarkable. And also, most recently, Dr. Edmund Gordon, who is going to be
Mhm.
105, I
Mhm.
believe he's referred to as the grandfather of Head Start. So it's really
Mhm.
fascinating that this
Yes.
is a full circle conversation.
Yes.
What would you say to those who are afraid of pursuing a graduate degree because of the cost, financially, mentally, socially, or even physically?
I speak and I answer this question based on my experience. Everyone's experience is different. I went to a baby shower the other day. The person who was having the baby shower shared with another family member of hers that I had just finished my doctorate, and the individual she was introducing me to was currently in a doctoral program. I did my doctorate while working and carrying the load of lifting a school that when I started as a principal on the path of failure, and it was COVID. It was an extremely heavy lift over the past 6 years. And I was in the midst of that as a principal and the first time being the principal. I just finished my year 6 as a principal. I started during COVID. And after we got out the grasp of COVID, it was time to actually start to do the work and do a lot of heavy lifting and change, mindset work. And that is actually what was guiding my doctorate. I said, I'm definitely going to do my doctorate on the teacher impact on English language learners' outcomes, because I really saw a correlation between the mindset of educators and how they spoke over students and how that changed the trajectory of student outcomes and achievement. But I was single when I started my doctorate, so I didn't have to care or take care of anything except for myself. So work was my everything. It was all consuming. Then I was in a relationship. That changed things, the demands that I had. I mentioned earlier the loss of my brother changed things on how I felt, the emotional load that I could carry at the time. And then taking a bite out of everything that it took to do this work, to understand the dissertation process, to understand the level of research that needed to be completed, to understand the level of planning and preparation of the methodology of creating a series of podcasts and coordinating with other principals during the school year for them to join a podcast. And I'm like, oh, it was a lot. It was definitely a lot. It was a lot physically, mentally, emotionally, financially for myself. I go back to the individual who I shared that I met at the baby shower. She was not working. She was staying at home, and she was definitely not on a time crunch to complete her doctorate anytime soon. She wanted to just really explore and be part of that experience. And we were having two very different experiences on this path to doctoral achievement. I'm not going to call it grumblings, but some of my feedback of that process, I would share with my husband, like, I'm doing this work already. It is very heavy. It took a lot of times where I had to step back and think, okay, if the whole point of the doctorate is to contribute to the scholarly work that exists around these theories, but also I always said I wasn't going to do this work if it wasn't going to equate to some type of impact or change for the communities that I serve and acknowledge the individuals that poured into me before I started this work. But there was definitely some points where it got extremely heavy. And I had to do a lot of work to protect my mental health, to protect the boundaries that I needed to set in the workplace, because many educators, especially principals and leaders, know everything is coming through you to you. From the beginning of the day to the end of the day. People think when you leave a campus that's it. Nope. You're still checking emails, you're still responding, you're still sending information to HR, you're still communicating to teachers and individuals on your campus that need you. The parent call and report that, hey, something weird happened today at the bus stop. And I think that there was a weapon. So now I'm calling the police and I'm stopping my doctoral work to get the other things that need to happen. So it really does depend on your ability to recognize what demands you already have on yourself, your ability to compartmentalize a lot of those things, because everything had a time and a place, and your village of support. My husband understood, and he recognized that there were times when I was going to be up late, that we would be like ships passing in the night, and that pouring into each other emotionally may not be the best at that time, because I needed to prioritize meeting deadlines and creating my podcast series. But we knew that there would be an end, right? That pot of gold that ends. It took a lot of discipline for myself because, like I shared earlier, after losing my brother, I remember sitting talking to the other individuals starting the program, the ASU teachers, and they shared with us that you're not going to be spending time with family. And that was like struck a chord with me. I'm like, no way. I'm not losing any time with my family after what just happened. I'm like, nope, I'm going to do both. So I definitely did both. There was one time when one of my colleagues messaged me and she said, Tasia, where are you at? We're in class right now. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm in New York City, Times Square with my nieces, taking them to this Cuban restaurant, and we're dancing out here on the dance floor. And we're having such a fun time and enjoying Cuban food. I was like, I'm sorry, that is not something that I'm going to sacrifice showing my teenage nieces their first time in New York City. I'll get to the work. I'm going to honor the work, but I definitely needed to not jeopardize or sacrifice my time with my family at the same time, just because it was so valuable to me. And I still crossed that finish line. So just finding out where you're going to give, what you're going to take, what you're going to have to sacrifice something. Towards the end, I definitely got to a point where I was like, no, my loves, my nieces and nephews, you can't come to Tay-Tay's house this weekend. I will come and get you in a couple of weeks, but I definitely need to do some practice defense recordings and have your Uncle RJ read these questions off to me. So there was times where I had to draw that line and balance, but it's hard for me to tell or encourage anyone because it really depends on what you have on your plate, what you're going to be able to manage. I remember when our cohort mixed with another cohort. It was so funny because I was like, oh my gosh, like that's the me version in another cohort. That's the you version in that cohort. And this cohort, they were not school leaders. And if you check the temperature of schools today, public schools today, there's a lot going on. But they were not school leaders. They actually worked for the university. And their roles were roles like supporting the enrollment of individuals who needed adaptive services with communication devices. My jaw dropped. I was like, oh my God, you must have all the time in the world to do this doctorate process. Like they were so laid back and relaxed. And I was like, so, my experience is not everyone else's experience. Mine was definitely double duty. I was definitely lifting and raising a school to the level of excellence that I wanted those students and that our community wanted our students to experience, and simultaneously creating a piece of work that would contribute to narrative theory and transformational theory, but at the same time support the excellent leaders and sustain excellent leaders in high need areas. It was very important personal work to me. So it was definitely a challenge. I told my husband, I always talk about this, but there was one point towards the end where I was giving him every reason to justify leaving the program. And I was listing it all out and I was boo-hooing and I was waiting for him to say, you're right. You should probably step back and you'll finish it later. And then after I said everything to him, he just looked at me like, I think he knew not to say green light, drop, leave the program. But I was like, oh, you didn't say it. And then a mentor friend of mine, one of the principals I first worked under, Stephanie Montez, I remember a couple of times when I was crying and whining to her about the demands of the program. And she said, don't stop. She said that she started a doctoral program and she stopped and she never went back. And I think I heard that a couple of times from individuals. So I said, no matter what, if you have to drag me over the finish line, I'm not going to stop. I'm going to finish. I'm going to keep going because that petrified me too, to start something and not complete it. So when she said that, I was like, okay, let me keep going.
I
Yes.
really enjoyed hearing you delineate how you prioritize your
Mhm.
work-life balance with regards to spending time with your nieces and
Mhm.
yet still getting the work done.
Yes.
Hearing you level set that is really a reminder as to why people do pursue the degree
Mm.
or drop out or never
Yes.
even begin before they start. And so now looking back at your dissertation title, Words to My Novice Self,
Yes.
Lessons Learned in Leadership, what inspired you to use a podcast as a vehicle for academic research and leadership mentorship?
In this day and age of technology, and I talked about it a little bit in my work, the wide use and accessibility of podcasts and the different modalities that individuals take on information. There's some people who can sit and read all day, right? And when you read, that's excellent, but that's still a one-way communication, right? You're taking on information from a text. But when you do use something in a format such as this, such as a podcast, right? There's so many different communication points that are happening, right? we are connecting with somebody, you're listening to those aha points. During the podcast, I remember individuals sharing and receiving information from other leaders and light bulbs going off like, oh my gosh, I'm not alone. That happened to me too. That was one of the first connections that I found when in the podcast format is that individuals were like, oh my gosh, I thought this was something that I experienced by myself. But when they find those connections, I found in that work was that there was less failure points because sometimes when you're doing this work so I shared about when you're a principal, there's no other principals to go to on your site, right? Especially in the format within my current district. There may be an assistant principal who is there sometimes, but you share that assistant principal if you have enough need on your campus where you're allotted an assistant principal. Some schools do not have assistant principals at all because they're delegated based on campus needs. So if you have a high behavior campus, for example, or a lot of students, then you will get that assistant principal. You could get an assistant principal part-time, but the majority of our campuses do not have an assistant principal. So you're the sole decision maker and you're finding yourself in that isolation point often. And I know that for me as a novice principal, I found encouragement, I found community, I found validation, I found my people when I was able to talk to other principals and other leaders, especially ones that were serving in similar areas as myself. And I say that when I talk to principals who did not serve in the same demographics as me, there was so many common points as well. So the Words to My Novice Self Lessons Learned in Leadership podcast format was an opportunity for brand new principals, brand new leaders to commune and talk about their experiences with other brand new principals, but also principals who are semi-novice and experienced principals who have served over 7 years, over 10 years in the leadership role. And a big takeaway that was interesting from those conversations when I went back and I combed through my data, my transcripts of my podcast, was so many lessons that the expert and the semi-expert principals experienced listening to the novice principals. So originally I went into that work and I was thinking that, oh my gosh, this is going to be so beneficial for the brand new novice leaders. But a lot happened for the experienced principals as well, listening to the novice leaders. And it made a lot of connections across the experience levels. So that opportunity for them not to be by themselves, to be in a safe place with others who understand when you're talking about a hiring situation or a staffing situation. There's really not a lot of safe places to have those conversations on our sites because everybody's your staff, right? So when you're having that conversation with another leader, it kind of brings it to another level of understanding and community and validation. And I'm always about resources, right? Sometimes I hear a solution or I share something and it turns into a solution for somebody else so that you're not making decisions or trying to solve a problem just in isolation. It's good to hear other ideas and other individuals, how they solved it or how they were able to handle a situation because it gives you different perspective and it broadens your toolbox of how to support and help and enhance and better your community. So I just love the opportunity to do a podcast style method for my research. And it was very exciting. And to this day, I'm like, I know I just graduated in May, but I so have it on my to-do list still to individually thank all of those principals in a very special way beyond just for being participants in my work, because I know that when I was defending my dissertation study, some of the feedback was that they were impressed that there were so many participants in my study. And usually it's a much smaller group. I had 16 individuals who participated in the work with varying experiences. And it was wonderful just to hear their different perspectives. So, and be a part of that with them.
There's so many thoughts that are running through my head just thinking about what you just said. But one of the first things in terms of the novices or the novice principal teaching the expert principal and vice versa reminds me of something that some elders that I care deeply about say, how one hand washes the other. And so it really reminded me of them and that. And in speaking about isolation, in a time where principal burnout is at an all-time high nationally, What strategies have you used to protect your own energy and keep your staff
Mhm,
motivated when demands feel overwhelming?
mhm, mhm. I love that question because that is something that I have to actively and very intentionally keep at the forefront. Because if you don't, and especially if you're a high capacity, us individuals who really like to work, like we can really get into those zones of working end to end, end to end. That's okay, right? And sometimes I know we use technology in different ways. And I believe in using AI in systems like ChatGPT in a way that helps you with that too. Yesterday, before going to work, I told Chat, hey, this is what I'm experiencing and feeling right now. Give me some Bible verses that you believe could support me with this and give me a Bible study to match it. And it did an amazing job giving me some Bible verses. I could hit play, started driving down the road. And one of the things that challenged me to do yesterday was to sit for 10 minutes, no technology, not thinking about anything as much as possible, no checking email, no checking on others, no checking. And I was like, okay, so I did my work for the entire day. And then I had to rush home. I did a last minute interview. And then when I came, I was like, I got to get home. I got to spend family time now. And then when I got home, my husband allowed, I was like, hold on, because chat gave me a challenge this morning for that 10 minutes, right? So I was like, let me do my 10 minutes of just solitude and silence and disconnect. And believe it or not, it was so challenging because I so wanted to like, oh, did this person reply back and accept the position? And that's going to bring me so much relief. But I have to disconnect for a little bit. I do believe in embedding that work and embedding those very intentional moments of grounding and slowing down with my staff. This is that offstage time for principals. So during this offstage time, I'm building in opportunities to do exactly this with my staff, right? To find those times where I can not only model it for myself, but to prevent that burnout for my teachers as well, because I know that being a teacher, especially a teacher at a high expectation school, there's a lot of that will be asked of you. So I have to make sure that I'm also creating space for them to have that time to check in on themselves. I'm very data driven and I keep data on all of my students, their proficiency levels across ELA and math. And I tag my teachers that are with those students each year. And I'm tracking if their data is going up, if it's going down. And I found a trend recently that the more unregulated that staff member becomes, for whatever reason, it could be marital issues at home, it follows them to the school, it impacts their students, whether it be they're not getting along with their teammate, whatever those emotional needs are, right? My data has shown that those students, that could just be one of the things, but those students perform at a different level. Why? Because if we're not regulated, if we're not emotionally abreast to how we're feeling for the day and presenting our best selves, there's no way that the product or service that we're going to deliver is going to be as effective, right? And I'm seeing that. So I'm like, okay, so this year, a lot of schools create different themes like Star Wars, above and beyond the stars. I'm not a big fan of that. So our theme this year is protecting the culture that we have created. So that means that if something's not going good for you in your class and you don't like this new thing that's coming down from our district, instead of us gossiping or creating toxic spaces, because all you're doing then is just unloading and creating that disruptive energy that slows down what we're providing. We're not creating vehicles, we're not creating ice creams, we're creating and pouring into the future, children, people. So when we're doing people work, it has to be, I think about a researcher or a doctor, they're having the all white and very delicate, careful work. We have to make sure that it's not tainted as much as possible, which means we need to take care of ourselves in every sense of the word. Like I said, I'm a connector, right? So I reached out to a bunch of principal leaders and a bunch of leaders in education. And I said, hey, I reached out to this sound bath yoga company that is not too far away. If anybody wants to do a series over this summer, if we even just do 3 sessions together, we're definitely slowing down and grounding ourselves and making sure that we're presenting our best selves as leaders too. So it definitely is something that you can't let it go by the wayside. I had to go on a health journey when I started this doctorate. Something told me before I started this doctorate, you're going to try to lead this school and get a doctorate at the same time. And I remember being at the doctor. I was like, oh, I'm very anxious, a lot of things happening. And Just along with that, that required me to get up and move my body every morning before I even get into work. I lost a significant amount of weight. I lost 120 pounds because I knew that if I was going to be my healthiest self, or if I was going to ask other individuals to do healthy and make good choices and make good practices, that I was needing to model that and project that same expectation with others. And it helped me feel better. But it also helped me, like I said, I'm a connector. If there's something I find and think of, I'm like, who wants to do this with me? Come on, come on. I'm always everybody, let's do this together. It's going to make everybody feel good. Let's go for it. So, and I love that I have that influence with my community and with my school and with other leaders.
Congratulations. That's a significant amount of weight. And I'm grateful that you shared and you feel better. But
Yes.
even from the point of the sound bath had me hooked.
Hmm.
And
Yes.
that's great that you found the trend about how educators show up in the classroom and the
Hmm.
effect that it has on
Hmm.
students. It
Hmm.
makes perfect sense because
Hmm.
life-changing events tends to be reflected in most people's work. There are
Right.
some people who can compartmentalize and
Hmm.
ignore those situations, and people don't look like what they're going through, so it
Hmm.
could remain hidden. But the fact that you're able to identify something that's happening with a staff member and
Hmm.
how it impacts students is really innovative as well.
Yeah.
As we close, I just have a few more questions.
Hmm.
And one of them being, why do you think the culture of education forces leaders to put on a mask of perfect
Hmm.
confidence? And what happens when that mask finally breaks?
That's a good question. And I'm an analogies girl, right? So I always think about when things are not going good at home, right? Parents and their kids, maybe dad lost his job or some type of struggle is happening, right? And parents oftentimes, they don't go, hey, kids, come on in here. Dad lost his job. We're trying to figure this out, because they know that that can project stress or anxiety, and those kids can't do anything about it, right? And they take that on later, right? Like, oh my gosh, what do I need to do about this, and how it manifests in your children, right? So I think about that as leaders. As leaders, we often hear about things happening before our staff know about it or before other teachers hear about it, right? So I feel like oftentimes leaders try to do a sort of damage control, or try to either, I can speak for myself, or I want to protect the culture that we've created, right? I want to make sure that is this something that's going to cause alarm, panic, or shift the path that we are on? Is there anything that we can do about it? Do we have control over this, right? Or is this something that is bigger than all of us? And if so, how much do I need to actually divulge to my staff in order for us to still do the work that we need to do? But at the same time, respect. I don't want anything to blindside my staff either, right? So I have the tendency of being pretty transparent with my staff, not to the point of alarm, like, oh, this is about to happen. But case in point, right now in public schools, and I do run our schools page from a principal page. So I see a lot on my feed of different school districts across the country. And I find it so interesting that whether the school district is in Utah, or if it's in North Dakota, or if it's in San Francisco, or if it's in Florida, there's a lot of the same thing happening. A lot of ousting of people at the top, superintendency, a lot of attacks on public schools and voucher systems, and just a lot of similar occurrences. So that tells me, okay, there's something that is bigger than just what's happening here within our own district. And when people have made the decision to enter into education, you have committed to education, whether it be where you're currently at or where you're going next. I've actually had an influx of individuals who have left education, my teachers who have left education to be educators in the corporate world, because people have found that teachers know how to deliver instruction pretty well, and the content really doesn't matter. You could be delivering instruction on how to sell cars at Carvana, but teachers do it a whole lot better than individuals outside, because that's what we do naturally, as educators do naturally. I'm seeing an actual influx of teachers who are like, I could do this, get paid more, and not deal with a lot of the sticky pieces that are happening in education right now. I believe that education is going through a reform. I believe it's been going through a pretty major reform since COVID. So it is a very rocky time, right? So I feel like often when I am communicating information that is big breaking news, potential, what's coming down the pipe here, that I'm doing it in a way that is, I am not hiding anything because I wouldn't want anything hidden from me in order for me to make decisions about where I'm currently at and what I'm doing. But also at the same time, I want people to have that full disclosure, but also that the work will carry on here and what we do for our students in our community will carry on here as long as it will carry on. As long as we have individuals who have that mindset to do that work. But I believe that the challenge, that mask that is expected of us as leaders to deliver in a way that it shows confidence because we don't want to cause panic. But at the same time, I think it's important for individuals to see us as real people too. Very early on in my principalship, year one, during COVID, I had, unfortunately, the loss of two students, and I was not prepared to do that, to have those discussions with staff that I was just learning and getting to know. And both of them were very much surprises. And one was a house fire and one was a health issue that surprised us all. And I had to deliver that information to my staff, and staff that I was just getting to know, they were just getting to know me. And here we were having this discussion about our early morning discussion before going on to campus about what had happened. But as a leader, I believe that we take on those roles and we know that we are the go-to person for those difficult conversations. It's never easy to have those conversations. And eventually, I'm not going to say that it's easy, but it definitely helps you understand your role and supporting your community and being the chosen leader for your community to help your community when things get rough. And you have to take that mask off and really connect with your community and make sure everyone knows that still everything is going to be okay.
Hearing you speak about having to deliver difficult news reminded me of the business icon, Mr. Ken Chenault. During
Mm,
9/11, he had
yes.
just begun his new
Hmm.
role. He had to really become a transformational leader and
Hmm.
go from crisis to support mode really fast. And that
Yes.
is really one of the areas that he's renowned for it. And he really showed his leadership skills during those
Mm,
tough moments. And so I'm so grateful that you were able to step up
yes.
of times of challenge to be able to deliver such difficult news. So,
Hmm.
in speaking about time, if you could step into a time machine and sit
Hmm.
down with yourself on the very first day as a classroom teacher, or even as a principal on your first day, what is the most critical piece of advice that you would whisper into your ear?
Let's see. I would definitely, just off the top of my head right now, I'm thinking, I'm sure later I'll think about like, no, I would actually tell myself this. But I would remind myself and tell myself that God's got you. You're going to make it through and you're going to continue on. Sometimes we feel like the obstacles have gotten too big in front of us, whatever that obstacle is, and to just not give up. Continue to push yourself, take care of yourself. Sometimes when people say push yourself, don't push yourself to a breaking point, but just know that run your own race. The right opportunities will present when it's time to present. What seems like it is too big in that moment and may consume you, it won't. It'll pass, it'll shrink, it'll be in the rear view mirror, whether it be in a week, 2 weeks, or 3 years. But not let things that feel like that they are defining you, that are obstacles, they will not define you and be your obstacle. Quite frankly, be the opposite of what that moment is. So do not let anything that feels like it is too big or too consuming consume you. Let it pass and move on. Continue to move forward.
That's a great visual. And
Mhm.
how would the whisper or message change for an aspiring EDD graduate?
I would definitely say and encourage them to know that you're not the first person on this path. And I think that I learned that a whole lot more after graduation. I don't know if it was because my algorithm was listening to me so much, but there's so many individuals who, and I love that. I love to see different posts and stories and Instagram reels and jokes and things that were not funny about the process, right? Because I was like, oh my gosh, that's so real. That was such my experience. That was so how I was feeling about it all. And know that you are not alone in that process, and that there are individuals who are going through the same, have been through the same, and you will come out on the other end at the achievement level that you are desiring. So definitely know that there's resources out there, and even sometimes a chuckle on Instagram of other individuals who went through achieving and getting their doctorate. I just found so much comfort in that. Like, oh my gosh, like, look at this. This is how I'm feeling. And someone else felt the same way. I saw a meme that I posted the other day on my LinkedIn, and it was like, and my final act of love will be putting you in my acknowledgement section, right? And I was like, it is, so just know that this is not a lone experience, even though it feels lone at times. It's not a lone experience, and that it will come to fruition, and it will get to the level of completion, and that you will be so satisfied.
This conversation was so satisfying and refreshing for me. So, to our listeners, remember that you don't have to lead in isolation. And if today's conversation made you think, laugh, or dream bigger, hit subscribe, leave a comment or a review, and share this episode with another current or aspiring EDD. Dr. McFarlane, thank you so very much for being with us. And to
Absolutely.
our listeners again, your support helps these stories reach more people who are ready to step into their leadership journey. So be sure to subscribe and share the message. Until next time, keep learning, keep leading, keep finding new ways to become addicted.